I started tinkering in the early ages with, little toy Casio keyboards and old tape recorders and stuff, and this was probably the 80s. I was born in Orlando, Florida. I've lived in St. Louis. I've lived up north, but I've been in LA since the 70s. I didn't start doing music professionally until the 90s. And I started actually producing music and releasing records, doing a lot of breakbeat records and some techno, some hip hop, releasing 12 inches and stuff.
So you can hear it has some of those like similar sounds to the old Atari games, and old video games, and it has an interesting random glitch feature where it just goes random if I hit it. Let me try it again here. So yeah, it just randoms out. Different random glitches every time you turn it on. You never know what you're gonna get. The Skyline Electric Train.
Musicians were like, oh, the electronic stuff is noise. They're just pressing buttons. What is that? That's just good for science fiction. And they're not necessarily trying to make instruments sound. They're not trying to redo a violin sound. They're not trying to redo a brass section. It's just like the sounds that the keyboards make or what drives the musicians that use them. From my opinion, that's what I see. Actually, I really don't play. I do not play any instruments at all. I just a lot of sampling with sampling keyboards and synthesizers, and done a lot of electronic music and synth programming and drum machine programming, and I really don't play any instruments at all though. I just freestyle on the keyboard. I bring a lot of drum machines out to the shows and different circuit bent devices, and I basically just add the sounds, a little bit of the background. Sometimes I lay a beat down and everyone jams on it. For the most part, I just bring weird circuit bent sounds, drum machine sounds, sound effects from records, sound effects from CDs. I've always been into the electronic sounds, the synth sounds, the weird laptop music that's happening, the breakcore and all that. And a friend of mine was aware of this, and he said, there's a show coming up called Bend This, and you should maybe check it out, because he knows I was into this kind of weird stuff. And I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And it was an event of circuit bend performances. So my wife and I went, and as soon as I walked in, there was a guy. As soon as I walked in the front door, a guy had one of those old, like Texas Instrument computers from the 80s, but the top was all modded out with like tons of switches and knobs. And I didn't know what that was. I was like, what is that? I remember the computer, but what are all these switches? And I look on the wall, and he's projecting these distorted 8-bit graphics, like video game graphics, but they're being modulated by the sound of the room. And I was like, that is really outrageous. And then the event went on, and all these guys had these tables set up with all these toys and drum machines and weird instruments. And it was really a good performance. It was like these guys would just turn these toys on, and then I'd hear like old Atari video game sounds or old vintage arcade game sounds. But then I look, and it's like a Fisher-Price toy baby keyboard, and I'm like, the Atari sounds are coming out of this baby keyboard?
So I mean, I just get some crazy sounds. I really get some good sci-fi sounding synth sounds from it, and I've used it a lot live, and I'm having a good time with it. But like I said, completely random. I never know what I'm gonna get. Sometimes I get some really interesting sounds I like. Sometimes I don't get anything. Sometimes I don't get anything out of it at all.
It's preparation for takeoff. Please watch the following video carefully.
It's these strange instruments and toys being modified in a way to generate new sounds that weren't necessarily out there. I mean, synthesizers and samplers and computers, you can do a lot of things with them, and you can get a lot of sounds from them, but it seems like you get an array of sounds that you wouldn't regularly get, and sometimes you may not get the same sound twice. I mean, the circuit bent instrument is so random, so many random sounds generated. It's a really small network, believe it or not. It's like they say, it's a small world. And I remember it very clearly. I mean, the first performer I saw was a guy named Univac, and his set was really good, and I was really blown away by his sound and the devices he had. And you know, he had this one thing that was like a flower or something, like an automated flower that maybe did a greeting or something, and then he turned the knob, and all of a sudden it just went to this rumbling, growling, weird thing, and I was like, that's like a flower greeting toy. But Univac was one, and then X-Do-Geth, which is like a hardcore circuit bent / noise performer who puts on the Bendless events. His set was pretty outrageous, and he has some extremely intricate circuit bent gear. I mean, it goes all the way down from, you know, anything from a little toy Fisher Price thing all the way up to these rack systems that he builds, which is just, I can't even speak on this, it blows me away. But then I also met a guy named Jeff Boynton who performed, and I have a lot of stories with him since then. But yeah, I have a lot of interaction with all the guys there that I saw performing at the event. Some guys come from hard rock background, some guys come from, like for example, Jeff Boynton's like a classically trained musician, like plays cello, and I don't know how many instruments he plays, but he's a very gifted musician. He's toured in the 80s with a lot of synth groups, and I've seen guys that come from a noise, like a hardcore noise, industrial noise background into circuit bending, and I've seen guys that come from hip hop and techno into circuit bending. They come from all over, and it's really interesting, the melting pot of diverse styles that people have, what they came from into the circuit bending music. And I'm hearing a lot of different elements with circuit bending. Like, for example, there's a compilation that came out called Blown Circuit on Tiger Claw Records, and you know, there's it'll be like, you can hear some rock, you can hear some techno, industrial, just a lot of different styles incorporating circuit bending. There's some noise, it's half broke, half bent, some industrial sounds, some crazy bent sounds. I'm having a good time with it. Basically, I could